My name is Allie Johnson. I am a member of the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Team, board member, and also the Outreach and Events Coordinator, and graduate of the Evergreen State College, and Olympia local, born and raised. Why should we restore the estuary and for whom? There's many reasons to want to restore the estuary, as I'm sure you've all heard today. My personal reasons are, I probably would divide it into environmental and cultural reasons. Cultural reasons being, I think that is the only true answer that can be found in terms of respecting and working with the Squaxin Island tribe. They've been working and opposing the dam ever since it was put in 1951, and I think to work with them and honor that is really important. Their reasonings, I can't speak to all of them because I'm not a tribal member, but they absolutely span historical, cultural, environmental reasons, as well as we know like tribes have very close ties with cultural resources, as they're often called, which we know as like environmental resources or like food. And so that would be my reason there, and it's been a huge honor to be able to work with Squaxin on this project. And also restoring the estuary for non-tribal people, specifically children of the future generations, I think is really important. And so that's my view on that. Well, it kind of goes back to the initial colonization of Olympia, and in the early settlements in the 1850s, particularly the Bigelow family, the Sylvester family, in the ways that they, what we now know as illegally land grabbed places in Olympia and Tumwater, and immediately began in the decades after that looking to exploit shellfish, timber, and other resources. And the estuary was great for shipping, actually, and that's a large reason why the Tumwater Brewery is where it is today. So with the creation of the lake, which we also know as like the putting in place of the Fifth Avenue Dam, that immediately was harming water quality, obviously. Shellfish harvesting in that area wasn't able to happen. And it also goes back before that too, is that there is creosote pile painting industry along the banks of the estuary before the dam was put in. And so that area became really toxic, and it wasn't able to be used. And then you have the physical removal of tribal members and the internment on Squaxin Island itself, which I believe was in the mid-1850s. And so in a really physical and geographical way, it was removal, I guess. It was like colonization in a really physical sense in terms of like altering the landscape and then like the physical removal of tribal members. So, well, that goes back to 2008 when I was pretty young, and I grew up in town, and my grandma and I would always walk in the Deschutes Falls Park near the upper basin and around the lake as well. And there was one day that we were there, me and my best friend, and we went, this was before the lake had the fence put around it. And so we went into the lake, and Lord knows why, but it was gnarly. And so what we did is there was all these dead fish laying in the water, just floating. And we were looking around, and we saw all these dead fish around us, and we just looked at each other, and we were like, this isn't right. There's something wrong here. We weren't scientists. We'd never been to college yet. We weren't able to like critically put into words and analyze like what was happening to this ecosystem, but it was just, we knew. And so after that experience, I just kind of grew up knowing that like the lake is not a sustainable ecosystem. And so when I was at Evergreen and Sue Patnud, the executive director, came and spoke to my class and we did a tour of the lake, I was like, hey, let me help you. Let me be your intern. Like, you don't even have to pay me. I just want to work with you guys. And I just kept bugging her, and she took me on, and I've been with DERT for 2 years now, and it's been a really valuable experience. So, ethical relationship. Well, how would I describe my ethical relationship to the environment? For me personally, I look at our current state of our local ecosystems and environment and can see and understand that they are almost in collapse. And so for me, as a European settler on Indigenous lands, I do see that I have to pay my rent, essentially, and do what I can to try and help wherever and however I can. And so that's been really important to me in the last few years, and understanding my role in that. When I first started working for DERT, I was so overwhelmed by the lake, and it just seemed like this really physically massive problem that is so blatantly highlighted by the state capitol. It is Capitol campus grounds. I wouldn't even want to go walk around the lake. I would drive by and just be like, I would shudder. I'd be like, God, it's just so overwhelming. And I eventually grew to want to go down there and take observations, take photos throughout the year of the different patterns of algae and the different levels that the state raises and lowers, and how they work the dam and things like that. And recently I've found myself at the library looking up photos before the dam was put in, personally as my way to rebut against arguments that the estuary would never be as full of water as the lake is today, and that it would be in a constant state of being in mud flats. And just been finding a lot of pictures that's not true, and so hoping to share that information. And I love estuaries. They're my favorite thing ever. Every time I find myself at a park, I'm always drawn towards where the river and saltwater meet, and I just see a lot of really great projects going on. Locally, we have the restoration of the Skokomish estuary, Nisqually estuary, the forestry work that's going on out at Woodard Bay, which is also a small estuary. And I just think that they're so valuable, intrinsically valuable, and also usually are historically very important sites, and also ecologically, because we know that they're some of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. And so the more I learn about estuaries, I'm just really passionate, and I love them. The biggest ethical dilemma to restoring the estuary, I would say a lack of understanding or willing to have conversations with those who would like to keep the dam in place. There is a very strong contentious argument that has been going on in Olympia for the past 20 or 30 years about this issue, and it's really just led to a brick wall, I would say, on the lake supporter side. And what DERT wants to do now is just move past that. It's gotten us nowhere. It's helped basically no one. We're still in the same situation in terms of waiting for environmental impact studies to be done. And so I think what really needs to happen is a true meeting and sit down with the stakeholders, so the local business owners in the area, the Department of Enterprise Services who manages that property, DERT, local citizens, CLIPA, who are the lake supporter group, and as well as the tribe. But I would really like to see that happen, but with the tribe not just labeled as a stakeholder, because I think they're a lot more than that. And that's kind of how they're put now in the discussions and consultations that are happening with the environmental impact statement. And so that's been my major recommendation to them, is that you have to involve the tribe as early as possible and absolutely take into account all of their concerns and recommendations, because ultimately they do have the power to supersede any decision that's made. And they always will stand in the favor of estuary restoration, so it's just a smart move and a respectful move. I won't go too far into it, but Sue has made recommendations to the lead, they're not scientists. Sue's made recommendations to the heads of the environmental impact statement that's ongoing right now, and just acknowledging that if they want to gather community public comments, and as that is part of the scoping process of the environmental impact statement, that they cannot be biased in that way. And so they were very interested in getting public comments from the Harbor Days Festival, which was happening at the same time 2 blocks away from the festival that DERT and Salmon Defense and Squaxin had put together, the Festival of Vista Chass. And they refused to come and acknowledge our event and gather comments there. So that was just a really interesting thing that happened, because Harbor Days is almost exclusively put on by Lake Soapworkers and CLIPA and the Rotary Club. So it was interesting. Excuse me. So just looking at ways to keep things non-biased, yeah, it's important. Well, as a board member, I would absolutely advocate for reaching out to DERT. We're always looking for volunteers. We do a lot of educational events, public forums. We invite speakers. We will be having the next festival, Vista Chass, August 24th of 2019, and that has proved to be just a really incredible event in terms of education and empowerment, and bringing in tribal leaders and performers and speakers and the canoe families. So I highly recommend getting involved with that. And also, right now, which is critically important, is that people contribute their comments on the scope of the environmental impact statements, so what they want to be studied. And that comment period ends November 13th, so we are just looking for those comments. Yeah. Well, I would say 2 things. 1, vote, please. We have champions for the estuary up for election right now, Beth Dolio and Ty Menzer, and we need those people in office. And I would also just say spend time around the lake and learn for yourself and observe and take personal observations of what's going on. I think it's really important to do that first and kind of get a feel for what you see and how that makes you feel. And then if you want to, there's so much science backing why the estuaries should be restored. And that's what DERT is really all about, is having that strong backup. And so making that available to the public, and just encourage folks to learn more and go outside and go to the other estuaries in town. I mean, go to the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually Wildlife Estuary, go to Woodard Bay, go to Skokomish. It's amazing. Go to Mud Bay even. It's off the side of the freeway, but that could be like a whole park in itself. It's just amazing. And watch how the tides rise and fall, I would say, if you have a chance. It's really beautiful. It happens twice a day. It's a constant, and I think that would be really beautiful to see in the estuary too. So.